impact on the continent. Our second role or service is as an innovation partner. And here we work with larger organizations like multinationals, governments, academia, investors, or even development agencies to see how we can co-create solutions that can then be scaled up in the marketplace. Our third service is, looking at being a systems enabler where we solve, very complex and sophisticated problems in the market, whether it be unemployment or even poverty. How do we collectively bring our resources and capabilities and design using innovation and, if possible, ventures to really transmit solutions and impact for the continent? So we're really excited about our work at HYBR, and we're looking forward to partnering with you and talking with you as we transmit impact on the continent using innovation. Thank you.
Last night we touched the skies, a blend of mushrooms, I could feel it in my head. Ribs I had tea, we've been laughing all night. Drank till the last glass we could barely see.
Good morning, everybody.
The floor is yours, Thobi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm just trying to share the slide that we are going to use today. The slides that we're going to use today. So I have chosen to speak about something that I think is not only very close to my heart, but I do believe that it's something that affects a lot of us in the workplace, just our attitudes, how we approach certain things, and just applying some femininity to it. It is Women's Month. So yeah, I thought it was apt that we sort of talk about how we women can actually drive some sort of change in workplaces, because we're finding ourselves in spaces where there's quite a number of different generations, and how we can all hold each other's hands and ensure that we move forward. So just by way of introduction, I am a talent acquisition and talent management specialist. I actually run a small consultancy that specializes in general recruitment, executive search, and also providing talent management services to small businesses that are on a growth path and that are building teams. And the other side of it is that I am a career coach, and I do this on a platform called Bizpreneur, which is a collective of women who are taking advantage of the strength of collaboration. So you'll find that if you look at the profiles at Bizpreneur, it's women who have come together and said, we have these skills, and every time someone asks for assistance with something or wants one of our services, we can always refer them to the individual with those skills. And why this title was really chosen is that, one is working in, I've been working in recruitment and talent management for, I think, 10 years now, since 2012. And this sort of reveals both the positive and the negative aspects of how organizations and their employees engage each other. And one of the challenges that's actually brewing in these spaces is that we are finding ourselves with 3 generations right now, could be more, but I will focus on 3 generations right now within the professional circles, and finding that these people need to somehow work together, but also adjust certain attitudes that we have towards each other to drive that evolution in workspaces, and how we are all responsible for just collaborating and creating fluid workspaces that are going to be sustainable and make sense for those that are going to come in to the professional space. So it's not a new topic. That's my take on it, really. I think being a millennial myself, I've had that experience of that otherness within the workplace, where maybe generations before us seemed to label us at that time as the problem child. We needed to be understood. There were a lot of articles that were written about how different millennials were, how we didn't conform to the norm and the like. But looking at the current workplaces right now, I don't think that anyone was, excuse me, quite prepared for that diversity that the post-millennials are also bringing, a very different set of people, and the conversations bubbling in these spaces also, I think, indicating that the presence of that otherness that generations before have experienced, and we need to take a few steps back and find solutions that are going to create a future that we all want. So I hope that this will be engaging. It's not an academic sort of discussion by any means, but it's just sharing what the experiences have been and how we can move forward. So just to define the generations that we have. So there's obviously Generation X, which is individuals that were born between 1965 and 1980, and people who are currently, I suppose, in their 40s to 50s. They're senior managers in the organizations that we work in usually, and probably have the most experience. And then we've got the millennials, people who were born between 1980 and the late 90s, who are building their careers or have been building their careers for the past 10 to 15 years, are getting into senior management levels and are probably going to be responsible for driving a lot of change for the future. Then we've got the younger lot that's coming in, and that's the individuals that were born in the late 90s to 2010. So yes, the entry level to junior level professionals. So they are coming in and just showing us how different the world can be at this stage. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of just understanding who they are and what we need to adjust to ensure that we properly engage them. So I do believe that there's questions that we need to ask ourselves, like, where are the challenges? There are a lot of positives, I think, in the corporate space generally, but where the glitches or the bottlenecks come in is just where we find the challenges, like finding defined corporate spaces and practices. By this, I mean that we are walking into these spaces that have a certain structure, a certain culture, rigidity in a way. And these spaces are saying to us, you must be this person, you must conform, you must work in a certain way to achieve what the organization wants. Yes, we all want to do that, but I do believe that there is a certain level of flexibility that we need to allow in these spaces to say, okay, everyone's coming in, there's different personalities, different age groups, how are we going to move things about? Also, limited flexibility in management, I think, can be a challenge that we are facing. And by this, we mean that, people not wanting to change just how they see things and how people or different generations approach maybe problem solving, or what they think of the workplace and how exactly they experience it. We also have, I think, very rigid expectations at times. So again, it's a matter of attitude, not wanting to change, thinking that we've always done things this way and why must anything change? And then also some dismissive attitudes. I think we will find that sometimes in the workspace, you will find that people tend to say, we've always done things this way. You come in, you conform, you can't bring in anything new at times. And when you do, it's either viewed as somebody who is a bit of a challenge or a bit of a rebel. So we need to change those attitudes, or the idea is to just change those attitudes and not be as dismissive as we are of other individuals within the spaces that we work in. So some of the experiences that I think have come up is that, when younger people come into the workspace, we're saying they are not as loyal, they are not as, I suppose, committed as maybe generations before would have been. That 9 to 5 attitude, and also going away and working at home sometimes doesn't really work very well for quite a number of people coming in now. People are really focusing on work-life balance, ensuring that there is, or rather they're ensuring that they are not spending, I think, a lot of time or way too much time focusing on only work, but also trying to have other things, particularly in their social lives, that sort of balance it out. So sometimes there is a challenge there where we think people should be responding to emails at all sorts of hours and trying to get people working throughout, or not understanding why someone would not be available at a certain time. I think social media has also pushed certain things to the forefront where we are so accessible. Let me not say social media, but more of technology, where we are so accessible that people tend to want to send messages at any time of the day, and sometimes that just that presents a challenge for some who just want to switch off at some point. So those are sort of the challenges that I've sort of noted in the conversations that I've had with candidates, in the conversations that we have internally in the workplace. I don't know if one wants to sort of share anything so far in terms of the challenges around having these different generations there. Or any questions at this stage?
There is a comment from Wanda. The biggest challenge with Gen X is that mentality. We have done things this way. Now it creates an us versus them. So I'm not sure if Wanda maybe wants to come off mute and comment.
Okay, thank you for that. Wanda, would you like to speak to us? Can Wanda hear us?
He says he can't be live.
Oh, okay, that's perfectly fine. So I think Wanda's comment is very apt. At the beginning of the discussion, I did mention that there is a certain otherness that we like to assign to people, and the perceptions then come in and someone says, oh, Gen X likes to do ABC, the millennials like to do ABC, without really understanding sometimes why people do certain things, or why those things suddenly present as a challenge in the workplace. I would actually want to sort of understand if there's anyone who works in talent management or in the sort of professional development space. Say, are there any organizations maybe that are tackling this head on and looking at what's there and what they are doing, or what they've described, what they've identified as challenges? Anyone to share? Okay, maybe we can go back to that later. Then just moving to the next slide, why one particularly wants to identify women as leaders and why we're important in this conversation. Not only sort of talking to women, I know, in this, but it's just a matter of sort of identifying our natural abilities and saying, how do we use them in the workplace to ensure that there's that fluidity and appealing, I suppose, to the feminine side of things, to say we can actually manage people a certain way and ensure that everybody is taken along. So some of the things that we thought would be important to note are that we have that natural ability to nurture. We are usually primary caregivers in the social situation, which means we are very much involved in defining what an individual becomes. For those who are mothers, I think you'll understand that, you know, as soon as a child is born, there is what you put in, of course, in collaboration with other people, to ensure that this person becomes, you know, someone who gives positively to society later on in life. So can we apply those skills that we have and those nurturing skills that we have in the workplace? I think that's something that we can also sort of talk about and see if it actually works. And then we also want to look at, I think, our expansive tolerance levels. Sometimes this can be deemed as a negative because of the way that maybe females or women would, you know, give passes to quite a lot of maybe behavior that we should not tolerate. But why not turn this around and make it positive and say, if someone is going to come into this space and I can see that they're challenged, or I would like them to prosper within this environment, can I take a step back, listen to what they've got to say, understand them, and ensure that instead of you know, putting stops or judgments before understanding them, I can actually you know, tolerate what their experience is and ensure that we have an understanding and try to create solutions from, you know, based on tolerance, to say, if I were this person, how would I want to be treated and how would I want solutions to come about? I also do think that we have the ability as women to gently persuade and influence those around us. I think people will agree with me when we say that we drive quite a lot of decision making in society in general, and we need to have the confidence to come and do the same in the workplace. By that, I mean that, you know, sometimes there is, you know, that professional persona that we need to put in, but there's also that, I mean, that we need to show, but there's also the other side where we need to engage the social skills that we have to say, I don't always have to be rigid and about all sorts of facts and figures and the like. I can sit back and sort of say, okay, how do I get buy-in from those that are around me? How do I influence them to actually do certain things? And that's how we can push certain conversations within the workplace, even if it's at a granular level, a conversation just with one person or in a forum or organization-wide. But as long as we use those skills that we have, or the persuasion skills that we have, and influence those around us, then we influence change, or there will be a ripple effect that influences change if everybody has buy-in. And also just understanding the strength of collaboration. I have put there, it takes a village. And I think in a lot of our experiences, whether it's male or female professionals, we know what collaboration brings about, which is the strength to push forward and build sustainable businesses, or build sustainable solutions to any kind of phenomenon. So we should apply this in the workplace as well, just to ensure that everybody, again, gets taken along. We take away that otherness that we assign to people, and ensure that everybody sort of understands how holding hands and moving forward will actually be of benefit, not only to organizations, but just to the future in general. So at this stage, would anyone like to comment or add anything to what we've discussed so far? Any comments, anyone? Or maybe I should pose the question about whether we've gotten it right by saying that we should engage these natural given abilities that we have. Okay, if there's no comments, then we're going to move on. Then we've sort of wanted to speak about solutions as well to some of the apathy that we might find in organizations. And some of the solutions that have been put forward is just leading with empathy, first of all. Engaging that side of us that puts us in puts a person, like putting yourself in someone else's shoes, to say that, how would I feel if someone had these comments to say, or how would I feel if I was treated this way, or how would I like to be managed or treated so that I can contribute as positively as I can to the environment that I'm working in. And then I suppose when we talk about leading with empathy, it's empathy within reason. I think the next stage I've said apply reasonable compassion, but I must stress that applying empathy is also within reason, to say that then we don't become sort of doormats to everybody around us, sort of taking on and allowing certain things to pass that we shouldn't really, but ensuring that the empathy is for building and not to become people who just let everything slide. We can also be the drivers of compassion within the workplace. We do find sometimes that there is that wanting to conform so much to an organization's policies and how things are done and the like, to a point where sometimes we forget that we are dealing with individuals, we are dealing with people, we want them to actually excel so that the organization can excel as well. So when we apply compassion, when we say, okay, let me understand understand this as much as I can and come up with a solution that's going to build someone up within reason, of course. I think it works so much better. It engages individuals better. They feel heard. They feel like they can trust as well. And people come in there and want to do the best that they can because they are feeling human within the workplace. And then I've also included there what we would call leaning in. I think there was a lot of buzz in a few years ago when it was Sheryl Sandberg, who was, I think at the time, she's with Google or has moved on, but she had written about how the individual can actually sort of make efforts to drive change in their career. So when we look inwards, that introspection that we need to actually say, okay, I'm this person, how do I make sure that the best of my personality or the best of my abilities comes out in this space and encourages other people to actually function and function well within a certain grouping, then it makes for a space that nurtures people's ideas, maybe nurtures the way that they do things and encourages them to do more but also favoring the organization in that doing more. I hope that's something that I've explained well, that people understand. Are there any questions at this stage?
No questions. I wanted to find out, is any of this somehow related as well? I mean, something that I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm pondering on it or it's around female leadership, feeling that, sometimes as females, when we lead like men, in inverted commas, then we're seen as, aggressive and never assertive. But then when we lead like females, then it's kind of like, no, we're too soft. But do you think perhaps there's space for women to lead as, like as females, and not necessarily that I have to come across in inverted commas like a man to lead, but I can actually use my nurturing side, my loving side. Again, I think what you said is obviously not letting things slide. It's not about letting things slide or people getting away with things, but it's around, leading differently to a man. Just like in a home, the husband and the wife, or the mother and the father, they're both leaders in the home, but they play different roles. They're not, they're not the same. Yet it's acceptable for men and women to lead that way at home, but then in the workplace, it's like things change a little bit.
No, so thank you for that, Yolisa. I think what you've said is very important, and I suppose it's the it's the theme that we're trying to push forward, to say sometimes let's go back to basics. How are we functioning in certain spaces? You've given the example of how women do certain things at home, and the partnership with whoever is in that space. And we're saying, can we appeal to that as well and not have to constantly be viewed as aggressive or constantly want to behave in the way that maybe males would? And there's nothing wrong with males doing what they do, but sometimes when it comes to the very sort of natural and feminine approach, it's just softer, it's encouraging at times, and it ensures that we present differently within the professional space. And I do acknowledge as well that a lot of corporate spaces are actually still in sort of evolution. There's a lot, we've come a long way, I think, as females within these professional spaces, and those that came before us really have laid good foundations and built spaces where we can actually have these voices. We have Women's Month because of women that decided to take up the challenges of those days and head on, to take on the challenges of those days head on and move and ensure that one day in 2022, we can sit in a certain space and also have a voice. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there is still a long way to go. Organizations are still evolving, they will continue to evolve, but what do we particularly want to bring there that will ensure that that evolution continues, that there's that fluidity? Because 10 years from now, the challenges will be different, and we'll still want to say, let's engage in a different way, and let's push whatever we can to ensure that there is change. So I hope that's understood. Is there anything else or any other question? Okay, if there's none, then we'll just continue. So we've spoken about leaning in and making conscious efforts to drive change as an individual every day. So this is really about introspection and saying, how do I contribute to making things a little bit different? And then I think one of the other things is creating collaborative forums for discussions. By this, we mean that there need to be conversations, constant conversations within professional spaces that really talk about who we are as workers in whatever spaces that we are in. And these conversations should extend to being very open as well about the challenges that we sometimes face, the challenges across the board or individual challenges, but ensuring that these challenges are noted and also dealt with to say, how do we accommodate, again, within reason, everybody who is here, and ensure that 80% of the time or 90% of the time, everything works well for them so that they can contribute positively to an organization. I'm actually wondering if there's anyone who's sort of experienced these sort of forums or discussions, but particularly those that are looking at females in the workplace and how we hold each hands within the workplace. Is there any organization, or maybe someone can give us an example of what's done in their space? Any contributions there?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Please repeat the question again.
Okay, thank you. The question really is around whether there are examples of maybe organizations or workplaces that have created these collaborative forums where there are discussions around what we're experiencing across the ages, and ensuring that it's open enough for everybody to understand.
I think there are quite a lot of organizations that are doing this internally, at least within the tech space, because I'm in the tech space, and it's sort of become a requirement, a standard across the board that every single organization within the tech space has to have some kind of CSI program or initiative that will allow gender inclusivity, because there's a major disparity So just from where I'm sitting in my perspective, almost everyone is trying to see how can they get more women to get into tech, or how can they balance the numbers? How can they focus on the internal culture? That's also a really big thing in the tech space as well, because you find that most of the talent, it's difficult to acquire, and then it's also really difficult to retain, simply based on the culture and the ethics of the organization, because most of the really talented individuals are Gen Zs. And I think we all know that, you know, Gen Zs are not in it for just the checks or the golden watch after when you get to retirement. It's more of what is the culture like, what are the people like. So I think actively every tech company that I've interacted with, even startups like myself, we are actively, you know, trying to see how can we, you know, push for mentorship and inclusivity and, you know, sisterhood. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much. Apologies, everyone. I just have a bit of a coughing fit, so if you could bear with me. So thank you very much. It does answer or address the question, you know, around what organizations are doing. And I think what's interesting is that you've brought in, I've been speaking in a very general sense, but you've zoned in on a certain sector where I think it is imperative that people do that, because a lot of the ideas that are, excuse me, that are going to move us forward are actually going to come from these young people that come into these spaces. And instead of impeding on their ability to just be creative and free, we can encourage these forums or discussions or initiatives that actually say, come in here, you're going to be listened to, you are going to be encouraged, and we're going to make sure that there is a success or prosperity in whichever way that you move. I suppose the challenge that comes in other spaces is that maybe they are not as fast moving as the tech space would be. So we always will want to catch up, but I do believe that it's a very good example of where certain things are applied and they seem to be working. I suppose, you know, those that are watching these spaces would also share the same sentiments. So thank you very much for that. Is there anyone maybe from another sector or space that could tell us about, you know, what actually happens within their space when it comes to creating these forums? Okay, if not, we'll move on. And then one thing that the lady that just spoke, Ms. Sawari, mentioned is something I think that's very important in corporate spaces, in just creating inclusive workspaces. I sometimes talk a lot about mentoring and sponsorship, creating some sort of sisterhood, but by sisterhood, I don't mean that we are excluding the brothers, so to speak, but just bringing in, we want to bring in that female perspective and say, let's hold hands, let's ensure that everybody is included, and let's support each other. So some sort of buddy system within the workplace that makes sure that everybody who is within an organization, or most people within organizations, because there are some who really not maybe appreciate certain things, but most people within organizations have someone or some space that's almost a sounding board, or somewhere where they can lean on when they need some sort of support, be it you know, in their career or balancing certain things even that are even beyond. And I think some of the good examples of this, again, are those forums that are created, but also in certain spaces, you will find that there are organizations that encourage the pairing up of individuals to say, here's one person coming in, there's someone who's a bit senior or who is a little bit more experienced than this person. Can you pair up and ensure that you move forward? This also comes through, I suppose, in training, constant training that we have, or in, I suppose, any sort of professional development. But at the end of the day, being conscious about just being a mentor and a sponsor as a woman within the workspace, I think will help a lot of individuals, will help build the confidence of a lot of individuals and their understanding as well. I don't know if anyone wants to speak about any sort of mentoring or sponsorship maybe that they've done or that they're experiencing, and what their experience of that has been and whether it has actually helped them along the way. Anyone to share? Maybe I can share my own experiences as a female, and I like to call myself an entrepreneur, but someone who's passed through corporate as well. Along the way, there are people that have held my hand and ensured that I get to certain spaces or get access to certain things. And it's not always a very structured sort of mentoring or sponsorship, but it's about someone sitting down and saying, I understand the stage that you're in, what you're trying to build and where you want to go. And that has helped open, doors actually. And I've seen how it's kept me and other people who are the recipients of that very much encouraged, very much feeling acknowledged and knowing that, yes, I'm starting off in a certain space, but I'm going to make it because there's somebody who's saying, let me just follow in my footsteps or lead the way, apply your own flavor to it, obviously, but ensure that, you have someone, ensure that you always have someone that's a sounding board that you can go back to and say, I've had this experience or this is happening. How do you deal with it, or how would you do it? So that's been, I think, an experience that I've had both in corporate and outside of that in self-employment and, starting off business. So very grateful for that. And then if we move on, I think I just wanted us to maybe have an open discussion to just understand people's experiences, what people's experiences have been, or if there's any questions that anyone has before we close the discussion. Or anyone wants to share or has a comment on anything? Okay, if there's none, then we can just have a bit of a recap to say the talk, what I wanted to share today is, I think, very anecdotal. There's, I suppose, a lot of studies or thinking that can be put to it or applied to it, but at the end of the day, it's driven by, I suppose, the experiences that we would have, some of the conversations that we have along the way with people across the different ages and generations within the workplace and what they would want to see. I can share that I've had an experience of doing a work readiness program with some young people. And I remember that when we started it, the challenge really was that there was some sort of misunderstanding between them and their employer and just how they engage and do certain things. And one of the things that really stood out at the time was how they said, we all hear this, we're told how we're supposed to do ABC, but no one's really leading us. And I think sometimes that's where the issue is. They're like, please give us the information, give us the tools, give us the encouragement. We've walked in and we've just been told, oh, I'm a 2000, I hear, instead of, allowing people to be and saying, okay, how do we actually help you to achieve? So I think just closing, I will go back to, let's apply that, the natural given talents that we have. Let's apply that compassion, that empathy, that ability to influence, and use that within the workplace to ensure that it's fluid enough to achieve the results that we need professionally, that the organization needs, but to also create workspaces that are going to make sense even in the future and encourage these conversations in the future as well. So thank you very much. That's what I wanted to share today. I'm hoping that there's been some insights that people have picked up, and if there's any questions, we can still have that.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an interesting session. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Anyone else before we close?
I think, hi, Thobi. I think Wanda mentioned something on the query that he had, or a comment that he shared, that, there's that generation, there's the millennials, and then there's Generation Y, that really, I mean, if we are at a stage where we do work readiness programs for these, for the different generations, because if you look at Generation X, I don't think that these kind of programs were there, of which now, there are things like work readiness programs that are there to ensure that, things are done the right way, that, maybe those are the kind of things that will assist the millennials or the Generation Y to actually understand that, it's never the issue of us and them, but the fact that, we need to be compassionate, we need to work from a different, we need to view things objectively, that, it's not about do as I say, but how to ensure that, we work in harmony, and that at the end of the day, whatever that we're doing, it's results driven. Considering, I mean, Generation Y, they're active, they are there, everything with them is like, technology. I mean, they've got all of these things that are around them, digital, the world it's on its own, that, things have changed, there's evolution, there's a lot of things that are happening, with them. So now when I'm reading what Wanda was actually saying there, was that, maybe this Wanda is a millennial or Generation Y, because the term us and them, it's something that is actually there. So this discussion of today is actually an eye-opener that, sometimes when we think of things, we're thinking them from, we can never shy away from thinking about them from a certain generation, because the younglings will think about it from a certain perspective, and the millennials and the Generation X, that thinking will always be different. So I've learned, at least now going forward, I would use that mentality that, where is this thinking coming from?
Yes. No, thank you very much for that comment. Yeah. Okay, please speak, Yelisa, and then I'll speak after.
Yeah, so I actually also, I mean, as Upon is talking, it just reminded me of something that happened a few years ago, where a colleague of mine was sharing. So her father is a doctor, and at that point in time, he was close to retirement. And he ended up being called in, for an operation because, with technology now, there's also, tech even in the medical space where operations are not always, cutting open a patient, where they'll insert whatever it can see and, procedures are done without, cutting a patient. But what happened in this particular case is that there was an emergency and they actually needed to cut open the patient. And now the doctors that were there were the newer doctors that and who are only familiar with the technology, and they were not able to cut open the patient because, for that particular procedure, because they were used to using the technology. So I'm sharing this to say that at times it can seem like, no, you are too old school, or no, you are too new age, but actually you need both. So
That's
certain
true.
things need us, even with cars. Certain cars still need their old mechanics. Even though cars are electric, but at times the electric part of the car, something happens and you actually need the old mechanic to get your car to move. Because the electric part
That's
of it
true.
has failed you. So I think it's those nuances, that are important as well, to see that we both need each other, that it's also almost like a baton as well being passed on, that the older generation passing on the baton, because we also need that wisdom, that knowledge in terms of how things were done, what worked. Yes, certain things don't work anymore, but there are things that worked that we can still use, even if it's not necessarily using, but just having that knowledge at the back of your mind, or having that knowledge as a foundation in which you then build something new. So it's not like one is better than the other, one needs to be obsolete, but I think there's a need for both generations or all generations to come together and work together for things to move forward.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much, Elisa. I think you've pointed out things that are very, very important. And one of the most important is that things work both ways. Why are we complaining about people coming into the workplace and doing things differently? Why are we saying we've always done this way, we've done things this way, and somehow don't want to change? It's because maybe sometimes we are afraid of change, or just not welcoming to what maybe the future holds, or the uncertainty that the future holds. But if we are looking at those that are coming after us within these spaces and saying, this is the future, let's mold them, yes, with the traditions that we've had along the way, but also allow them to bring in that new flavor of what they're experiencing and how they see the world, then I do believe that it's a way of moving forward. And why I applied this particularly to females in the workplace is that we are quite, I think, a strong set within the spaces and can really appeal to people differently and use that to move forward. One of the comments that came in from Anin says it's best to be authentic in leading. And I think if we actually think about it, being authentic and being ourselves in certain spaces can actually push the spaces that we work in forward. We somehow need to unlearn or let go of, oh, if you're in this space, then you need to behave in this way, and you can only be a sort of cookie cutter version of the person that came before you without anything new. Let's put a different icing on the cookie. Let's, put a few chocolate chips. Let's put something else, sugar-free cookies, whatever it is, just to ensure that we are sustained and we push the agenda of sustainability and understanding forward. I hope that's something that we can all do. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I think that if there's no other comments or questions, then we can actually close the session. There's a few messages that's come in. Wanda telling us, thank you for the eye-opening masterclass. I'm glad that there's, been a conversation has been started, or a different way of thinking is somehow being influenced. Very grateful that everyone was here to listen to this, and hoping for the best in the future for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thobi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thobi. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us. We really appreciate this time and you sharing your insights with us. And we hope that you had a wonderful Women's Day. And we hope that Women's Month as a whole, as well, that you'll continue to enjoy it and that you'll continue, even with the work that you're doing, to inspire us and help us to integrate in the workplace as there's three generations working in one place. And just a note as well is that so our sessions continue for the rest of the day, and you can use, and so our theme is future-proofing women for change, and you can use a QR code to see the rest of the schedule for the month. And we've got masterclass at the next masterclass is at 1 o'clock. And thank you so much. Thank you, Thobi, for your time. We really appreciate everyone as well who's come and this morning and joined in. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you as well, Wanda, for your interaction and engaging with us.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Sandra, please stop the recording. On YouTube as well.